presented by Rocket Mortgage.
Live from the O'Reilly Auto Parts Studios, here's Jake Asman.
We're going to hit on the Houston Texans here because I think their offseason coming up is absolutely fascinating. The big question for the Texans is going to be, you start with the head coach, David Culley. Could David Culley be one and done after Nick Caserio hired him last offseason? That's the big question surrounding the team. The Texans are 2-10. Nick Caserio left it open-ended when asked about Culley's future, saying, well, we're going to talk about that in the offseason. We're focused on the Seattle Seahawks this week. If David Culley was your coach, Nick, I feel like you might give him a vote of confidence there, right? Let's find out, though. For more on the Houston Texans, we waste no time. We go out to the Progressive guest line right now. We bring on Texans Insider for The Athletic, Aaron Reiss. Aaron, appreciate the time as always, man. Great to catch up.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jake.
So what did you make of Caserio's comments earlier in the week? He was on the Texans flagship station, and he was asked point blank if Culley's back next year, and he didn't say yes, but he also didn't say no.
I think that expecting him to commit right now to having him back at this stage of the year with the amount of time left in the season and what they've done so far was probably unrealistic. I didn't necessarily expect that he would say for sure he's coming back next year. I mean, they are 2-10. Even if you expected the team to be bad, I think it would kind of look odd to just say for sure everything's on board and it's good to go. But I thought the more notable thing is just that it wasn't just so much that he didn't commit to him. He didn't really give much level of support to him at all, or much props to him for anything. So I think that was notable.
So do you think ultimately, though, he would make David Culley a one and done coach? You wouldn't care about the backlash of firing a guy that you brought in, year one on the job?
I think people thought that David Culley was going to be a transitional coach. So that seemed to be the prevailing sentiment when they hired him. And if that is what they ultimately plan to do with him, then I think it doesn't really matter, if you're going to fire him, whether after 1 year or 2 years, if you think whoever is the right person to kind of guide the team into the next phase of the rebuild is ready to go and ready to come down to Houston. But I think that ultimately comes down to whoever that person is, to Nick Caserio, if there is that person, if that's the way they feel, is that person ready to come down? And then two, do they feel like they're at a stage with the team that they want to kind of add the new coach, right? I think a lot of this could come down to, what do they think and they're going to do at quarterback? That has to be a consideration, right? Do you want to draft a rookie quarterback and then have him kind of spend his first year with David Culley if you have these doubts about kind of the way things are being run? So that's kind of one consideration I think will matter here.
Aaron Reiss from The Athletic joining us here talking about the Texans situation here in Houston. Aaron, when you look at David Culley and the job he's done, obviously the roster we knew going in was not great, but how would you evaluate what he's been able to do with this roster from a head coaching standpoint?
Yeah, I don't really know if you told me before the season that they would be 2-10, I don't really think that would come as a huge shock. But I do think that there have been elements of this that have probably been uglier than I might have imagined, at least personally. He's been a really not great game manager. And his kind of explanations for some things are pretty tough to listen to. When he kind of forgot that he called a timeout against the Patriots and thought it was an incomplete pass, or when he declined a penalty so he could punt earlier, and just generally being very conservative. He kicked from the two against the Dolphins in a game that was just miserable, and they had not been anywhere near scoring territory in 3 quarters. So there's just been a lot of things I think as a game manager hasn't been great. And if you think that he's going to be a guy who you're bringing in to kind of manage the personalities, keep the temperature in the room at the right sort of level, I don't know if he's necessarily done that. He obviously has some support. Some of his players say they believe in what's happening here, but he's had discipline issues with multiple players, obviously resulting in Zach Cunningham getting released this week, and previously benching Justin Reed, who was the Walter Payton Man of the Year nominee for the team for a game. So I think it's tough to kind of know what edge Culley is providing them right now. He doesn't even call plays, so that's where the argument to keep him becomes hard.
Is it tough to listen to him tell you that he thinks they're running the football well, even though we all can see they're not?
Yeah, I think that's kind of one thing that has seemed. I'm not trying to act as though what he says at the podium is what makes or breaks a coach. Obviously, there have been plenty of football coaches who are very successful who don't say a lot. But you have to take him at his word on these things, and he. His logic sometimes is hard to follow on some of this stuff. And because either it isn't really match up with what happened in the game, or, it's just repeating that the same things are going to fix these problems. And they don't.
Aaron Reiss is our guest, covers the Houston Texans for The Athletic. You mentioned the Zach Cunningham release earlier this week. Obviously, last week he was suspended for the game against the Colts. The previous week, you hit on it, Justin Reed. We've seen a bunch of defensive players this year, Aaron, get suspended for a game. So I guess my question to you is, which random defensive Texan do you think is suspended for the game against the Seahawks tomorrow?
Oh God, yeah, I don't know. I don't want to speculate on that, but I do think that it will bear watching. How does kind of the rest of the season go in terms of the buy-in from the rest of the players and stuff now that they've made a change to Davis Mills. This clearly is a team that is focusing more on the future, and that was always the case. But they're kind of leaning in a little bit here now. And so, how does that go over with some of these veterans in this team? Will be interesting to watch.
Aaron, when you look at the offseason coming up, obviously Nick Caserio is going to get an opportunity to have his own draft picks. He's going to have a lot more salary cap space, but Deshaun Watson is certainly hanging over this entire organization. What in your mind would be a timeline on when you think a Watson deal could actually get done and the Texans can start to move forward without the Deshaun Watson shadow hanging over the franchise?
Yeah, I think that it's something that we can't know for certain, right, because of the legal situation. Obviously, I think the kind of key pivot points that matter, just from a football perspective and like the roster perspective, is at the start of free agency. As long as Watson is on the team, that $40 million he's going to count against for 2022 is also on the team's books. And so that's, Zach Cunningham was $12 million in dead money. There's some other guys with a few million in dead money. Deshaun Watson is essentially $40 million in dead money for them next year unless they trade him. So that's going to matter kind of around right before free agency starts, as it starts. Not that I expect that the Texans are going to be big spenders otherwise, but still something that they're going to have to maneuver around. And then obviously the draft. If you don't trade him before the draft, then this is same argument we would have had during the summer. If you don't trade before the draft, well, then you might as well hold on to him the whole year, right? See if he could change his mind. Obviously, they wouldn't change their mind in this case, probably, but at least you would know that you want to know the slots of the pick. So if you don't make the move before this year's draft, then there's not as much incentive to do it again until the next year around, other than obviously keeping that huge cap hit on your books.
Aaron, how does a potential Russell Wilson trade demand impact Deshaun Watson's market?
I think that Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, if there is anyone else on the move, to a much lesser degree, obviously, like Jimmy Garoppolo, and the more kind of quarterbacks that we're seeing moved, and especially the really good ones, just like anything else, right? If there's more supply of them, then it's going to affect the market. There's going to be other options for teams, and certainly the other options do not come with kind of the same sort of looming cloud and red flag that we don't totally know. What the outcome will be in terms of punishment for Deshaun Watson from the league and, in criminal court.
Do you think that
in civil court?
Yeah. Do you think Deshaun's value, Aaron, is still what Nick was trying to get reportedly from the Dolphins at the deadline, at least 31st round picks and then other picks as well?
Yeah, I know that's obviously what the Texans, what they wanted at that time. If maybe their price changes with time, I don't know. But I think I would presume that would still be the value that they would, go after. And, this is the NFL. If it sounds like there was obviously a lot of interest from the Dolphins on what's going to happen here during the rest of the season and where teams are going to go, will kind of probably make a lot of more teams consider their quarterback situation. So I think that even with this uncertainty, teams really want a guy who's an elite quarterback, and he is that, so it'll still be something to watch.
Aaron, from a draft standpoint involving this Texans team, obviously right now they'd have the third pick, but they'll have a game with Jacksonville next week that could decide if they end up, let's say, in the top two. Do you think there's any chance they go quarterback early, or do you think it's way more likely they take one of these stud edge rushers in Kayvon Thibodeau or Aiden Hutchinson?
I think at least based on what I understand about the draft class this year and the quarterbacks, that it wouldn't make a lot of sense to draft a quarterback that early. Obviously, a guy could make a case for himself during the draft process, and maybe that changes things. But as of right now, I'd expect that they would go get one of those two guys you mentioned. Obviously, if they trade Deshaun and that maybe gives them more picks in this draft, they could go get a quarterback, or they could, find one in the free agent market, or basically punt this problem into next year with another kind of bridge quarterback similar to Tyrod Taylor, or let Davis Mills start out the year, kind of like the Broncos did with Drew Lock, where they basically gave him the year to prove if he could do it or not, and then they, where they were ready to pivot after that. So I think that all those options are on the table. how Mills plays during the rest of the season will obviously be important in deciding what they do.
Is there a scenario that exists, Aaron, that they trade Deshaun Watson? They obviously have an extra first-round pick this year, and they go quarterback with that pick, and then they could just go best player available at the top of the draft?
Yeah, I think so, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many moving parts here. We don't know what the return is for Watson, but I think if they do get something close to what they want in return for Watson, then that's a lot of draft capital kind of to maneuver around the board and do stuff with. I wouldn't be surprised if, given the amount of needs that the team had, if they maybe if they acquired multiple first-round picks in 1 year, they might also try to move back on the second one or on the first one, and to acquire more draft capital in future years, because this team needs a lot, and so they need a lot of flexibility and kind of keep adding year after year for a little while.
What are some of the positives you could find about this team? Are there any young players that you watch this team every day? You're around them all the time. Who are some of the young players that maybe could be building blocks on this team going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously probably the biggest positive of the year, I would say, is John Grenard. I think he has 8 sacks now. I mean, he might not be the great number one edge rusher the team needs, but if he is complemented by one of these other guys, that's a pretty good duo potentially. And, that's a guy who he wasn't productive in his first year. He seems like much more of a natural fit as a 4-3 defensive end. So they seem to have found something there that's encouraging. And I think, Mills has not been tremendous, but a lot of it is the supporting cast, and also he is a third-round pick as a quarterback. The history of those is generally not super kind. But the other guys in the draft, they found some, it seems like, serviceable players. They made an expensive trade up for Nico Collins. I don't know how good he'll be, but he's at least good enough to already be this team's number 2 receiver, and he's done some stuff for this team. And Brevin Jordan has come on strong since after not being active for the first half of the season, so that's encouraging. And Roy Lopez, his nose guard is never going to make or break the team, but I do think that that's a really good value for them to get in the 6th round. So, last year when this team was 4-12, I think by the end of the year, this time everyone was kind of bemoaning the fact they weren't playing the rookies when there was really nothing to play for in the present. At least, if you want to give this team some credit, is that they kind of understand that, and they are, I think, leaning into the youth a little more in the back half of this season.
Aaron, what do you make of the dysfunction in Jacksonville? I mean, David Culley might not be a great coach, but at least he's not Urban Meyer.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it is pretty incredible to think that if there's a one and done coach and it's not David Culley, that it might end up being Urban Meyer. I kind of was more optimistic. I thought that might work somehow. I guess I didn't really understand Urban Meyer as up close to some other people. I thought maybe, obviously I knew some of his history, but I don't know. I was more optimistic about it. I thought that they had some good pieces, but they have not done a lot. And, I think that it might be worth moving on after 1 year just so you don't waste Trevor Lawrence, because it does seem like that's what's happening now based on everything I read and watch. He is not the problem, even if his stats make him look like he's not played very well. He's just not in a lot of sporting talent around him, and he hasn't really been helped out from his coaches.
Finally, Aaron, I know people are dying to know your take on this. You cover the Texans. The roof will be open at NRG tomorrow against Seattle. First time in your career covering the team for a regular season game, the roof will be open. Are you excited to experience it firsthand?
Well, I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was open at some point last year when there were not a lot of fans in there because after O'Brien got fired and they kind of needed something to get people juiced up.
All right, COVID year doesn't count then. First time in a non-COVID year.
Yes. There you go. I like it. I think I'm running errands around today in Houston, and the weather is great. And this is like the best time of year here, in my opinion. It's it's like nice and crisp, but not too cold. And so I think the roof open is the move.
There you go, Aaron. Appreciate the time as always, man. Enjoy the game tomorrow. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Jake.
Aaron Reiss covers the Houston Texans for The Athletic with us there on our Progressive guest line. Progressive, it just got easier to quote your home insurance when you use Progressive's Home Quote Explorer. Quote and buy all online at progressive.com. We'll take a quick break, wrap up hour 1 of 3. Jake Asman hanging out with you right here on Sports Map Radio.
Hey, baseball fans, download the